Welcome to Newman Lumen. I felt like this morning I should have said, live from the Newman Lumen Pavilion. Anyway, we might should have been doing that all term. I'm Jan Fuller, the university chaplain, and it's my honor to introduce our speaker this morning for Newman Lumen. This is one of the few Newman Lumens this year that we're doing live because of the moment that we're in, and so we're grateful that Dr. John Dooley is with us this morning. Dr. John Dooley arrived at Elon in 2014 and became Vice President for Student Life in June of 2017. He is the Chief Student Affairs Officer for the university and serves on President Book's senior staff. And John teaches courses at the university in the Masters of Higher Education and in the undergraduate core curriculum. John is a native of Wisconsin and lives in Burlington with Stacy and their 2 children. He is a leader of courage and compassion and clarity through the pandemics of COVID, racial injustice, and election division, and I consider it a great honor both to introduce him and to work closely with him, and I want to welcome him and thank him for being brave with us today.
Thank you, Jan, for that kind introduction. And we are here and recording it live this morning after the election this week. And my only trigger warning that I'm going to offer this morning is that I am not going to talk about the election, other than to let you know right now that I'm not going to talk about the election. I decided when I started working on this a few weeks ago that it would be too hard to predict where we would be this day and how we might be feeling. And now that it is here, that is still uncertain for all of us, I know. So today, instead, I want to speak to you from my own experience, reflecting on faith and our Newman Lumen theme this year, Bridging to Hope. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. This verse from the New Testament, Paul's letter to the Hebrews, is significant to me because it was the central theme in the eulogy I gave for one of my grandfathers at his funeral. I was 31 years old before I lost the first of my 4 grandparents, which means that I was fortunate to have deep relationships with all 4 of them into my adulthood, and they each played a significant role in my life. This particular grandfather, my mother's father, was one of the most faithful men I've ever known, filled with hope and possibility. He had a tremendous work ethic. He was an inventor and a dreamer, and over the years, he built up a small manufacturing company, producing a type of aerator that's used for golf courses. When sales were struggling over the years, and they often were, he was eternally optimistic, convinced that his big break was just around the corner, and this would be the year that everything would take off. All the while, he worked incredibly hard on his dream and his vision, and he never stopped working. In fact, the day he died, the week after Christmas, he was 84 years old, and he slipped and fell as he was closing up the shop at the end of the workday. He literally died at work. But he loved what he did, and he lived his passion and his dream. He was an eternal optimist filled with hope. My grandfather was a wonderful man, and I love him very much. But he also taught me the earliest lesson I remember about race. It's a story that I'm hesitant to share with you in this public setting because it tarnishes his image. I was a young boy, I don't really remember how old, but early elementary school, I would guess. I was in the back seat of the car. He was driving, and my grandma was in the passenger seat. We were driving in Racine, Wisconsin, the city where they grew up and met, a city midway between Milwaukee and Chicago. At the time, I was living in northern Wisconsin in a racially homogeneous environment where everyone around me was white. We were driving down the street in Racine, and we passed a group of teenage black kids walking on the sidewalk, something that would be a common everyday occurrence for most, but was unique for me. My grandpa looked back at me from the rearview mirror and said, "Hey, Jonathan, do you know what we call those kids?" And then he answered his question using a racially offensive term. "Raymond," my grandmother scolded him. I didn't really understand what my grandpa had said, but I knew immediately from my grandmother's reaction that it was wrong. And that was the day my grandfather, a kind, faithful, and gentle soul, taught me what racism and prejudice looked like. I've reflected on that incident over the years, and I never quite know what to do with it. How could this man, whose heart was so full of faith and hope, also have room in that heart for racial prejudice? What do you do when someone you love and respect does or says something wrong? I know that I'm not the only person who wrestles with these questions. In a few weeks, at Thanksgiving tables across the country, people will find themselves in similar uncomfortable places, with family and people they love, whose views and choices they find deeply objectionable. My grandpa's death in 2002 was not the only loss that we experienced that year. My wife Stacy and I were in our 5th year of marriage and expecting our first child. We were a young couple, still starting our lives together, and we were so excited to begin our family together. That year, I was chairing a professional association conference, so I was unable to join her at an early, important doctor visit, the one where you get to hear the heartbeat for the first time. But that was okay, because we knew that there would be other appointments along the way. But that appointment didn't go as planned. And Stacy was alone with the doctor when she learned that the baby had no heartbeat. We were devastated, and one of the hardest things I've ever experienced was being on the other end of that phone, hundreds of miles away, completely helpless. We didn't know then that miscarriages in the first trimester of a pregnancy are more common than most folks realize. But for us, as a young couple, that was little consolation. The sadness and the grief were profound. A Jesuit priest that we both knew at Marquette was an incredible gift to us at that moment. He prayed with us, he cried with us, he consoled us, and he led us in a blessing for motherhood that strengthened us. Father Gene Mers would become an incredibly important figure in our lives. 2 years later, when our first child was born, he would baptize our daughter, and then again, our son 4 years after that. Throughout our time at Marquette, nearly 16 years, Father Gene and Sister Carol Ann Smith led faith formation groups of work colleagues that Stacy and I each participated in separately. Around the time that Jack was born, things started getting challenging in my work environment, and I started having deep questions about meaning and purpose and what I was supposed to do next with my life and career. Father Gene started leading me in individual spiritual direction. Over a year-long period, he led me in the spiritual exercises retreat of St. Ignatius, the founder of the Jesuits. And for the next 4 years I was at Marquette, I met with him every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Gene became a mentor and a spiritual guide who helped me understand myself, my relationship to God and my family, and things that I never would have known without his support. He also helped me realize that I came to him asking the wrong questions of God. I was looking for an answer about what I was supposed to do with my life and career. But Gene helped me discover that God actually wanted me to wrestle with the more important question: who am I called to become? Father Gene was there for us at our darkest moments as a couple, for some of my most challenging decisions as an adult, and he continues to be a profound presence in the life of our family, even today, nearly 2 years after his passing. He helped us find moments of hope when it felt like we had very little. The third experience I want to share with you comes more recently this summer. Shortly after George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis, as people were taking to the streets across this country, we had a scheduled retreat of the leadership team for the Division of Student Life, the directors and deans who lead our division. At the beginning of the meeting, with about 20 of us participating, we opened up some space for reflection and conversation about the challenge of that moment, and what it meant for racial justice in the United States, and what it meant for us as leaders of student life departments at Elon. This is a group of people that I'm very proud to work with because of their convictions and because of the deep commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion that they carry. But as we went around that room and folks shared their thoughts, there was such tremendous and overwhelming anger, fear, frustration, and despair. People shared deeply personal experiences and connections to racial justice work in ways that illustrated the urgency of the moment of reckoning that we were experiencing. It was a heavy conversation, and it was hard. But I was struck by one of my colleagues, a Black female leader in our division, who even in the midst of her own pain and the stark visibility of American racism and anti-Blackness, was able to talk that day about hope. Her reflection on that moment was about how hopeful she was in the midst of all the demonstrations and protests to see white folks out in the streets in ways she had never experienced before, to see Black folks leading a movement, and to experiencing the centering and embrace of Black Lives Matter as more than a slogan and hopefully a set of commitments and a way of being that quicken a pace in the long march toward justice. To be sure, there was pain and anger and fear in that room, but our colleague helped us understand that even in the darkness of that moment, it was still possible to see the light of hope, to lift it up, and to use it to motivate us to work harder and better in our commitments. So I come back to that verse. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. When Chaplain Fuller talked with me about the Newman Lumen theme this summer, the idea of bridging to hope is one that I have to admit felt like standing on one side of a great chasm, wondering how you might possibly cross the ravine to hope way over there on the other side. The pandemic, political division, racial injustice, all of the divisions and fissures that we experience just feel too great to traverse. When hope feels so far away, what then is that bridge, and how do we build it? As I reflect on my own experience and those I shared with you this morning, I've come to understand that we are that bridge. It is us. We are the carriers of hope. How else does it come to pass that the little boy in the back seat of a car, learning an ugly truth about racism from a grandfather he loves, grows up to teach courses on diversity and justice and strive every day to be the parent of 2 children who grow up understanding the things he didn't? We are the product of our ancestors' experiences and love, and we are their legacy, but we also have the capacity to move beyond their worst actions and decisions. We are the hope in the unseen, the manifestation of dreams for us that they may not have even imagined. We have a responsibility to repair the world they left us and to continue the work that was unfinished. We are the bridge to hope. That bridge is also found in our mentors and our teachers. Gene Mers was a bridge to hope for me and for Stacy. He lovingly, patiently guided us across the canyon of uncertainty and doubt. He helped me answer questions I didn't know to ask. And that's what great mentors do. They challenge us, they inspire us, they root for us, and they help us see things in ourselves that we didn't know were there. And sometimes they nudge us to do something daring and to take a risk, to have faith and let go of what is comfortable. And that bridge is also found in our everyday relationships with our friends and our colleagues, and even the humans around us that we don't know. It could be the conversation we have when someone helps us see something in a new way. Maybe it's the inspiration of being in a community that takes action, motivates us, and calls us to become more than we are. Or maybe it's the kindness of strangers, either the grace extended to us or that which we offer to others. There are plenty of ways to look around right now and to be frustrated and disappointed with humanity. But I maintain it is essential to look more carefully for the beauty and grace in our midst, to find hope and inspiration in the people who move in and out of our lives every day. We are the bridges to hope. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Thank you.